And welcome back to Fox 59 tonight. I'm Cameron Riddle here with our information specialist of Hayes Consulting, Nichelle M. Hayes, talking about the history of Juneteenth, how it all started, how we got here to now. There's a weekend full of events, including here in Indianapolis this weekend, that you can participate in. But again, this goes back hundreds of years and now goes back 30, crazy to say, but 40 years was the 80s to where this all started to really become a mass and modern celebration. So, Nichelle, one of the things you wanted to talk about was the information, where all this comes from. There's a difference between hearing it secondhand and getting it from original sources.
So, yeah, I just want to talk about kind of the difference between primary sources and secondary sources. So, primary sources, an example of that would be your birth certificate, your marriage certificate, even General Order number 3 that I read. That is a primary source. Now, if I were to summarize that and share that with people, that would make it secondary. So, it's always good to kind of go to the horse's mouth to get
Mm-hmm.
the information to have a better understanding because you'll hear people tell things and retell them. And sometimes people miss things in translation,
Mm-hmm.
things are missed, but when you go back to those primary sources, then you can have a better understanding of exactly what happened.
So you've got some primary sources there that we can get some information on some of the things that I've asked about of what things were like when that news came down.
And so this is coming from On Juneteenth by Annette Gordon Reed. She is a Pulitzer Prize winner, and this is a New York Times bestseller. And this is coming from her chapter 5, Remember the Alamo. One ever feels the two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one dark body, whose dog strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. With these famous words, W.E.B. Du Bois, in his masterpiece, The Souls of Black Folk, identifies the central dilemma facing Black people in the United States that to a degree Blackness and Americanness have been cast in opposition to one another, a predicament created by the details of history and the desires of others. So, um, different people will read that and feel different things. My family has been here for about 7 generations. I
Hmm.
am an American, true and true. I say frequently that my family has bought and paid for this land,
Hmm.
served in the military several generations, put their blood, sweat, and tears here. But some people will look at me and say that I'm not American.
Hmm.
They do not see that within me. And so that
And why
two-ness,
is that? What do
uh,
they mean by
I think what they say is, I don't look the way they think an American looks.
that? Hmm.
And so their thought is a white American, but really we know there were all interlopers on this land and it's been taken from the First Nation people,
Hmm.
Native Americans. And so I think when you can sit down, have a conversation, think about things, you can have a better understanding. And that's why I think we're living in such a important time where we can have these discussions, we can have books like 1619 and things of that nature, stamped from the beginning, where it has a really deep dive into who we are as Americans and how we started
Hmm.
and what that means. And I think we can broaden the tent and I think we can be better for it.
So um, you've got so again that we talked about how um, the Emancipation was signed, Emancipation Proclamation, but it didn't. It wasn't like, "Psh, okay, everybody's free. Hit the light switch."
No.
It's not how it worked.
So, and I won't read the entire Emancipation Proclamation, but what it does, it delineates Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana, and certain parishes, including St. Mary Parish, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. And then it says, are for the present left precisely as if this proclamation were not issued. And so that's saying that the Emancipation Proclamation does not count for those areas, which is a huge
Read that part one more
space
time because now I'm trying to
trying
digest
to
that.
digest it. So it gives you all of those states,
Hmm.
basically southern states. And it says, are for the present left precisely as if this proclamation were not issued.
And which states was that?
Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Norfolk, parts of Portsmouth.
So then is it saying that all of these other states not listed are free?
Yes.
States listed here
Right. So
act as if
really,
nothing happened.
the North and the East
Mm-hmm.
are free,
Mm-hmm.
which some had enslavement and some didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So this is quite performative, but we had to have this before we could have
Mm-hmm.
freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that's why a lot of people say we're free-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And this made us free-ish.
Mm-hmm.
So people will tell you a lot of things, but if you're reading it for yourself and understanding it, like you just said, I need to digest it, because even me, I read it a couple of times before I shared it with you, and I had to stop and think. It's like, well, what exactly are you saying? And so, can you imagine enslaved people who were kept from reading
Mm-hmm.
and writing, and even though they were intelligent, they couldn't legally study.
Mm-hmm.
So would they have even have understood this Emancipation Proclamation?
So how do we go from that Emancipation Proclamation to 1865 in Galveston, where no, you actually are free now?
So the war was fought, and Lincoln wanted to preserve the Union. Didn't care so much about enslaved people, but wanted to preserve the Union. And so the North fought the South. The South lost. I hate to tell everybody that, but the South did lose.
Mm-hmm.
They were treasonous and they lost. And so at that point, they knew that to keep this together, we're going to have to free these people that were formerly enslaved.
Because why?
Because the Union cannot hold uh, while we are ripping ourselves apart.
Mm-hmm.
Someone had to say that this is not a matter of personal preference,
Mm-hmm.
that the entire country has to decide what we're going to do,
Mm-hmm.
and this is what we're going to do.
Because if not, if slavery is a thing that would have ripped the country apart.
Right. And even in the beginning, when you read the Constitution, where we are designated as 3/5 of a person, that was part of the compromise.
Mm-hmm.
So we were compromising from the very beginning. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, think about if we had just ripped the band aid off and said, no,
Mm-hmm.
everyone is free.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't have had to have Civil War. We
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't have had to have Juneteenth and Emancipation Proclamation and those other things.
So I'm not really trying to get political when I ask this next
Mhm.
question, but the 3/5 compromise has been something that's been brought up by our lieutenant governor. And since we're talking strictly fact here,
Right.
he says that the 3/5 compromise was part of the process into allowing slaves to then become free. Like he says, like this was progress.
Right. And
Was it?
what I would say, it's very much like the Monday morning quarterback. Monday morning at the water cooler, they have a clear view of everything that happened, what they should have done, the snaps, everything.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're in the pocket and they're coming for you and they're rushing you, it's totally different.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what we did with the 3/5 compromise is we kicked the can down the road
Mm-hmm.
to avoid making a decision. So, we said, we're going to compromise. We're going to let some of you be slaveholding territories and some of you not, so as not to again push us to this civil war. But it was not anything that set us up to free enslaved people. We could have just as easily not been freed, and let that sit with you for a little bit.
So the other part of that, so the 3/5 compromise. Now we're getting deep. Who was the 3/5 compromise for? Because I've heard it explained two different ways. That the 3/5 compromise was. Let me try to say the two ways that I understand the way it's been explained. 3/5 compromise for the North said was beneficial to the North because if all of the slaves were counted as a whole person, there would be more people in the South, and then the North would have no power. So it's been explained that that was a favor to the North. But I've also heard it explained, well, this was a favor to the South because if their people, um, if the slaves weren't counted at all, uh, well, then basically the South would have no power.
They were trying to keep the balance, and it wasn't necessarily a good compromise. They were just trying to keep the balance however they could. Another thing that they were trying to avoid is using those enslaved people to say, well, we have this many people, so we have this many votes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another aspect that came into it.
Mm-hmm.
It was Politics is the art of the compromise, and I don't think we've seen a lot of compromise in the last several years. And so I think it's hard for us to look at going to a table and saying, let's put it all here. I want this, you want that. You'll get a little of what you want, I'll get a little of what I want, but we won't get everything
Mm-hmm.
that we want. And when you are trying to make these decisions, it's the heat of the moment. You've been struggling with it for years, sometimes decades, and then sometimes you say we've just got to do something, and this is what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we did with the three-fifths compromise. And the problem that we had here is that sentient human beings were not seen as human. We were chattel slaves, and chattel slavery means we were seen as items. So
Mm-hmm.
just like I'd put in my will a house, a car, you would put in your will all of the enslaved people that were on your plantation or your
Mm-hmm.
farm. And so we had no agency. And people would say, oh, well, that's right. And, the Bible talks about slavery. But chattel slavery was totally different than what slavery had been in other areas. Also, beyond that, if a black woman had a child, that child also became enslaved, and then they were enslaved for their entire lives.
Mm-hmm.
So it was not like indentured servitude where you had a certain amount of time. Let's say you had 12 years, 15, 20, and then you could sign that off and then you could walk away. This was for perpetuity. And that's what made slavery in the United States so much worse than anywhere else.
So you said a couple times now, free-ish. Uh,
Free-ish.
what does that term mean?
So free-ish, and I went to an amazing program yesterday at the Indiana Landmarks.
Mm-hmm.
Eunice Trotter put that program on. Kudos to her and the rest of her team. And something that was mentioned was that you don't mind, like I said, my family serving in the military,
Mm-hmm.
even perhaps dying in the military.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine for us to do that. But when it comes for me to have my full rights, for me to be able to vote, for me to be able to live wherever I want to live, for me to be able to get paid whatever I'm worth, then we have a problem. And so that's what we're talking about when we say free ish. So when you look at the racial wealth gap,
Mm-hmm.
when you look at what a Black American average household has as far as how much money they have, how much it's valued, it's much less than a white American. Statistics show that a white male who has graduated from high school will make more money than a Black woman with a college degree. And so these are not just ideas in my head. This is data,
Mm-hmm.
and the data does not lie. And so that's what we're talking about when we talk about free ish. Even when you look at our health, when you look at these indicators, all of those are very different. So we've got to get away from this idea that it's a sick fish,
Mm-hmm.
it's a sick pond.
Mm-hmm.
The pond is sick, and that's what's causing us to be where we are right now. And so Dr. Pat Payne, the esteemed Dr. Pat Payne with
Mm-hmm.
IPS,
Mm-hmm.
she has a series of classes that kind of educate you on that. And so there are a lot of things going on all around us that we don't understand how it impacts our daily life. And that's what we're talking about when we say free-ish.
How do we um, become 100% free then? Again, and this all connects back to the original conversation because I have talked to people who have said their grandfather, a white person, their grandfather owned X, Y, and Z,
Mm-hmm.
and then that was passed down,
Mm-hmm.
and then that was passed down. Somebody of that same age in my family would have been a slave,
Mm-hmm.
and so uh,
Enslaved. Yeah.
enslaved, and so the we talk about 1980s and we talk about 1865. That was not all that long ago when a person, there are people who are 100 years old. So
Mm-hmm.
that it's 1865 sounds like a long time, and in a way it is. But for as long as a person lives, that's only a couple generations back.
Even survivors of the Tulsa race massacre, two of those survivors are in their hundreds,
Mm-hmm.
and they have yet to be given reparations for what they lost. And so when you go back to that free-ish and you talk about how do we do that, we have to fight in every generation.
Mm-hmm.
We've looked and seen what's happened with these executive orders and how these things have been pushed back. We have to fight. I know people don't want to hear it. I know they're tired, but we can't be tired and well doing. And we have to stand up. We have to call the people that represent us, state, local, and federal, and
Mm-hmm.
not just once, but multiple times, and
Mm-hmm.
say, we want you to do this. We have to band together with like minded people
Mm-hmm.
in organizations that are doing the work that we think is important, and we have to keep our eyes on the prize, and we have to talk to young people about why this is important and educate them,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of this is a shell game. And so part of the things that are going on right here is to distract us so they can pick our pocket.
So we've got about 4 minutes left here. So
And I want to have a conversation later about reparations. We need a
well,
whole nother conversation about
we
reparations.
gotta well, but no, explain that part too with and briefly if you can. But just one, what does that mean? Because again, we've got people who are still alive who are saying, "Hey, I'm expecting my reparations," and
Right.
again, we've got the current president not wanting to that
N-
statement even acknowledge.
No one wants to give up power or money,
Mm-hmm.
even though that's been earned on our backs. And so reparations is basically repair. If there have been laws that have been created that have harmed us, then you can also create laws that will repair us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think repair can be anything we want that to be. It could be education, it could be land, it could be money, and it needs to be, again, state, federal, and local.
Now, what's this talk about 40 acres and a mule?
So some people did get 40 acres and a mule. Whoopi Goldberg's family, she's done her family tree.
Mm-hmm.
They actually did get their 40 acres and a mule. Other people got it and it was taken back away from it. So again, very complicated. And so we've got to talk about how can we level that playing field, because we can't continue to push forward when some people have so much and others have so little. And we've got to talk about what is going to be the best for our entire country, not a small set of the population. So they talk about 2% of the population controlling 92% of the wealth.
Mm-hmm.
We're going back into a new gilded age.
Now, and for those who've never heard I said that in a way that assuming people knew what 40 acres and a mule meant. Assuming people don't know, what is that in reference to?
And so that was in reference to giving reparations to formerly enslaved people, and they had 40 acres of land and a mule. So that would enable them to work that land, to farm it. They only had it for a short time. Some didn't keep it at all. And then those things were reversed. And then let's not even start talking about gerrymandering and
Mm-hmm.
redlining. I mean, we can go all day.
Well, there's the phrase "pick yourself up by your bootstraps." Um,
Impossible to do if you have boots nor straps. If you don't
correct,
have either of those, yeah.
correct. And the 40 acres and a mule would have been the equivalent of, okay, here's your boots and your straps, go do your thing.
If we had been able to keep it, but we were not. And so that's what happens a lot, especially with the United States. Treaties are signed, and as soon as they don't like the way the treaty is running for them,
Mm-hmm.
then they'll flip it. And so you can look at that. But we hold other people to a different standard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's all these different things, and the person when I was having that conversation was talking about why don't you know, black people, why are we celebrating slavery was so long ago? Why are we even still talking about it? And it's because we're still dealing with the effects. I mean, you touched on you mentioned gerrymandering, but everybody is. It's not the playing field. If we were to go back and find uh, your great grandparents and somebody who you went to high school with and their great grandparents, they're probably uh, in very different places.
Absolutely. And that's what we're talking about with the racial wealth gap. And so you can have a person, a white man specifically, who has a high school diploma, will have much more wealth and then much more wealth to pass down to their family members than we might have.
Mm-hmm.
So it's complicated, it's systemic, and so we have to have systemic ways of repairing to make this better, so they're not continuing to move forward with the same issues and challenges. I will say that we are resilient and we fought, and we have a lot more than we've ever had before. But there's more for us to do, and the country, dare I say, owes us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they owe us a debt.
What should that be?
I think that's up for people to decide. But for me, I think that looks a lot of different ways. It could be free tuition, it could be free books, it could be money, it could be no taxes. I mean, I think we are creative. We're creative people. We have apps, we have all manner of things. We have virtual, things. We can think up something to make this better. And it doesn't have to be a zero sum game. There's enough here for everyone to be taken care of. But what we have is greed,
Well,
and that's holding us back.
and slide a little bit this way.
Okay.
But what you're also talking about, the things that you named off, are not things like here you have this and then you'll be rich. They're just things that here this will allow you to work to get on the same level. All you're saying is you're not asking for a handout to the finish line. You're asking for a hand to get to the starting line.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the big difference that people don't understand is you're just asking for the basics so that I can go to school and then I can work and learn and then the world
And
is my oyster.
there's a history of reparations. We've given reparations to the First Nation people. We've given reparations to the Japanese who were interned for 4 years. Reparations have been given to victims of the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if we can give reparations to those groups, if that can be done, then why not given to Black people? And I think we know the answer.
Well,
Yeah.
well, and I like the way I said it. That's a good explanation. Um, that reparations is not to get to the finish line. It is a hand to get to the starting line. And I think if people understood that better, then maybe the conversation would actually go somewhere.
I I think people understand exactly what we're talking about. I think they
I
don't want
don't.
it. I think they don't want it. I think that they want to hoard what they have.
Mm-hmm.
And they're afraid that if someone else gets a leg up, then
Mm-hmm.
that means something is going to be taken away from them.
Of
And
course.
again, I say,
Mm-hmm.
this is not a zero sum game.
Mm-hmm.
There's enough for us to just bake another pie.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot.
But it's good to have a discussion.
Yes. But again, this is a conversation that some people don't even think we need to be having, let alone celebrating this day or this weekend. So you've got several books that you brought, so people can check those out and learn more about some of the primary information as a primary source to find out more. I'd be interested in reading some of that. But also, while we have you, you are our East Side source of information. Anything else you can tell us? What else is going on the East Side people need to know about?
Well, I am already preparing mentally for the fair.
Mm-hmm.
I love the fair. It's my favorite time of year.
Mm-hmm.
Babyface is going to be performing. Very excited about that. So I'm lining up my free days.
Mm-hmm.
my special days on Wednesday, all of
Mm-hmm.
that stuff. So I can't wait. And IBE is happening.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be very exciting. So I hope that people will take advantage of going out and enjoying what we have to offer here in Indianapolis, enjoying your neighbors, maybe calling somebody you haven't talked to in a while, asking somebody to come out, maybe that doesn't get to come out, and just enjoying the summer. I'm a summer baby, so I love it when it's warm. So it's the best time of the year for me.
Birthday coming up.
Birthday coming up June 27th, and I
Okay.
celebrate for an entire month.
Okay.
So, bring it on.
Starting on the 27th or ending on the
I'm starting now,
27th? Okay.
and then I end on July 27th.
Okay. All
Yes.
right. Understood. All right. Well, Nichelle M. Hayes, thank you so much for coming on. By the way, speaking of things to do this weekend, go Pacers.
I'm just going to cross my fingers, and that's it.
They
I'm
blew those
just,
boys out
yeah.
last night.
We got to
That,
take it to OKC and see what happens. I remember the ABA.
mm-hmm.
I remember going to the fairgrounds and seeing the Pacers, compete at a high level. My mother is a fanatic.
Mm-hmm.
She loves all things basketball. Definitely we are Hoosiers through and through. So
Mm-hmm.
I would love it if they could bring back an NBA championship. I think it's definitely time.
It would be nice. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Fox 59 tonight. We're going to have more conversations like this on my radio show on Sunday, 8 a.m. on 106.7 WTLC and Hot 100.9. That show is Open Lines, where you can call and be part of the conversation. We'll have more visits like this, more conversations and information happening in and around Indy right here on Fox 59 tonight next week. For now, I'm Cameron Riddle. Have a good night.